Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've got an interesting problem here that I thought you guys might enjoy. So this is a single point car, early 90s, like 96, 95, something like that. And it came to me for regular maintenance work. The current owner just purchased it and it was running really poorly. I noticed that all the spark plugs were dark. It had the usual broken vacuum line in the back. I ended up doing a complete ignition replacement and also replaced the vacuum lines. So that brought all this, and I also did a valve adjustment. So that basically brought it back into normal service range here because this was all out of spec. There was too much resistance on the coil, wires were old, plugs were fouled. So a lot of ignition related problems, but more importantly, it was getting way too much fuel. They were running really dark. So uh, after fixing the vacuum line, and that was probably the biggest problem. I was running this car around, testing it out, making sure it was driving okay, and I noticed this one particular problem in that the upper radiator hose was showing hot, but the temperature at the manifold didn't match the temperature I was seeing up here. And these single point injection cars, they run an 88 Celsius thermostat, 195 Fahrenheit, and that's exactly what I was seeing up here. But down at the manifold, I was getting like 70, 75, something like that. So for some reason, the manifold was reading colder than the upper hose. So I went ahead and pulled the thermostat out, make sure there was a thermostat in there, which there was, and it was the correct one. But I fitted a new thermostat and ran it again, and again, I wasn't getting good temperature at the manifold. Now, on the single point cars, the temperature sensor is actually in the manifold itself below the throttle body. Other cars have the sensor up here, but the fuel injection one runs off the manifold. So it's very important that the coolant coming out of the block runs through the manifold and then back into the cooling system so that the engine computer over here knows what temperature the coolant is at to know that the car is up to temp and can make adjustments to the fueling. So, for instance, when the car is cold, it measures the temperature as cold and then adds extra fuel with the injector to warm it up properly, and then it tapers off its fueling. But if the manifold never warms up or the sensor's bad, then the computer will just keep putting in more fuel because it thinks the engine's cold, and so that's what it's programmed to do. Well, why was the manifold running colder than the coolant coming out of the thermostat? Well, let me bring you in for a little bit of a closer look here. This might be a little bit difficult to see, but when the thermostat is cold or closed here, the coolant cycles out of this pipe and it either goes into the heater, this line, which then returns down here, or there's a branch down here which runs to the intake manifold, and then the intake manifold runs back to the lower hose. So whether you have the heater valve open or closed, it doesn't matter because coolant is always going to flow down this lower branch to the manifold and back out. Now, I drained the coolant out of this car, and it was very dark. It was also very rusty. And I thought, aha, that's one clue. Rusty is never good. So I then went ahead and disconnected this hose here. I put my garden hose onto it with the lower hose disconnected. I hooked up a garden hose just to flush out this line. And I noticed that with the heater valve closed, I could develop a bit of pressure. Like it wasn't flowing properly through the manifold itself. And I thought, that's very interesting because this should just flow freely through it. But if for some reason there was a blockage, say too much rust or something else has gotten in there and it's preventing the flow from flowing, that could be the reason why I'm getting bad measurements from the temperature sensor. So then I went ahead and disconnected the line down the base of the manifold, and I ran a separate hose to it, and I flushed it in the reverse direction. Still wasn't getting quite the proper flow I was expecting, so I ended up using a compressed air line to really force a bunch of air, and I eventually did get a blockage to blow free. So there was a big, huge blob of rust inside the coolant loop in this manifold that was preventing coolant from flowing through it properly. But that still leaves me with the problem of where did the rust come? Well, the rust came from the block and everything else, and the coolant essentially went bad and no one bothered to check, and so the internal parts of this motor just started rusting away. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to run a treatment. So, and I've wanted to do this for a while, but I haven't had the time, and this car seems to be the perfect car to do it. So I'm actually going to run some of this this Thermocure through. Now, Evaporust did not sponsor this video, nor did CRC, but Evaporust makes a product that dissolves rust, and it's great. The Thermocure is designed for cooling systems, so I want to run this through so that it either dissolves or treats whatever rust is in here to try and prevent it from migrating around the system and getting to that sensor, because really the number one problem is that that sensor got blocked up and this car was just running like crap because of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through now. This is for up to 3 gallons, this 1 quart container. So I'll just go ahead and follow the instructions on the back, put it in, drive it for a bit, and then I'm going to let it sit for probably a weekend or so, and just let the solution just work away on the rust issues that this car has. Now, afterwards I'll go ahead and drain it and put in some fresh antifreeze, but while I'm driving the car I should be able to see if I'm getting better temperature readings from that temp sensor now that I've freed the blockage. But realistically, the reason I'm doing this is just to ensure that that doesn't get blocked again after I put the fresh coolant in. So that's what today's episode about, is understanding why it's so important to make sure that your coolant temp sensor is working properly, and to pay attention to your condition of your coolant, because these injection cars, they only have one sensor for the coolant temperature, and if it starts running weird, then this could be a reason why. Another reason why I wanted to try this out is that this radiator here is still the original radiator, and when you look down inside this cap, you do find that there is rust scale floating around the top of this tank. And since I don't know whether or not this car has any cooling issues, I could just replace this radiator outright, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to see if this product can handle some of that rust scale that's floating around on the top of this radiator. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I think it's worth doing. Also, this product here, they say that it is biodegradable, so if this does get leaked out of your system, say this dissolves a rust block or something in your radiator and then it leaks out of your cooling system, this stuff can be biodegraded. Other products I've seen don't have biodegradability, but this does, so I'm less concerned about this leaking out of the car than I am other products. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in. Now, this thing says 1 quart for 3 gallons of coolant system, so I'm going to go ahead and use the whole quart. It does say it's safe for paint and plastic, but I certainly don't want to just, splash this around, so just be safe when you're pouring it in. Alright, so I'm just going to pour all this in. It says 1 quart for up to 3 gallons. I did give this product a bit of a shake, so it's got some bubbles in it, but I don't want to get it on any painted surface or plastic surfaces. It says it's safe, but why do I want to risk having a reaction with anything? And there we go. Now I'm going to fill this up with distilled water. So I'm going to use some distilled water to fill this thing back up, because I'm trying to stop the rust problem, and I don't want to use just tap water in case the minerals react with the Thermocure. Now I did use a compressed air line to try and blow as much coolant out of this block as I possibly could, and I had the radiator off and I flushed it out very thoroughly, so this system is 100% empty for as much as I could get it. So it's going to take quite a bit of water to fill this thing back up, and I'll probably take a little bit of time running the car because I blew the radiator out as well, so it may take some time before I can get this thing truly full of water. But that's okay. Time is the key. We want the solution here to be in the block and the coolant line as long as possible, especially in that manifold. That's the most important part. Alright, well, I've got it all filled up now, so it's been idling here for a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out for a drive, and then let it cool down and check on my coolant levels, and then drive it again. So just at this point, it's going to be a bit of driving and then a bit of waiting. And like I said, I'll probably let it sit for a whole weekend in here and drain it out maybe on Monday. But the key is time. You want that solution to work on the rust as much as possible. I mean, if you had the time, you guess you could just let it sit in here for a week. I don't know. But that may be too long. I have no idea how long it takes for the solution to do its job, but I'm sure when I go on the test drive it, I'll be able to tell whether or not that coolant loop is now freed up from the work I did with the hose and the compressed air. But that's really the most important part. Like I said, the Thermocure, it's really to just treat the rust that's in here and try to either dissolve it or encapsulate it in some way so it doesn't block up that line ever again. So I've had the car out for a bit, and I brought it back in. I just want to check with my sights. The coolant temperature that the computer is seeing is 84 Celsius, and if I use a temperature gun here, the head's about 85, radiator's about 85, the line going to the sensor is about 85, so we are seeing good numbers on the temperature gauge and up here. So thermostat's open, we're up to temp, we are reading good coolant numbers at the computer, and more importantly the dash is now reading correctly. So here's where the dash is reading. Just a little bit lower than the mark, but honestly that's pretty good for the accuracy of these gauges. Before, when I was first driving this car around, I noticed that the temperature gauge would not even get out of the cold range, so we've certainly achieved at least normal running on the dash here. And here we are, day 2, with the Thermocure sitting in the engine, and I'm going to go ahead and drain it out today. But what happened over the weekend is I put the Thermocure in, drove the car, let it sit for 4 or 5 hours, and drove it again just to circulate the solution around the motor. And after about 6 hours, I noticed that I could hear a slight hissing sound, and lo and behold, the freeze plug on this side of the manifold actually decided to let go, or rather the Thermocure ate the rust dam that was in front of it and it started leaking. So I'm glad I found this problem, and I would have only found it because of the Thermocure. But yeah, I'm going to take this intake manifold off and replace that freeze plug. So I guess good and bad results so far, but let me go ahead and drain it out and show you guys what it looks like. Now it is going to be black. The solution does say that it turns black when reacting with the rust, so be prepared. So I've got the Thermocure drained out of here, and you can see it's pitch black. Went in clear, came out black, but that's what it's supposed to do. It means it's chemically reacting with the rust. Managed to save quite a bit of it, so they say you can reuse this. I don't know how many times, but I'll save it for later. So for now, I just need to do a coolant flush. They say 3 to 4 flushes with coolant or just plain water. So I'm going to flush this out with plain water, try to get the rest of the debris that's in the system drained out, and then get the rest of the Thermocure drained out of it. And then I'll go ahead and fix that freeze plug, and then get the system topped up with fresh coolant. Well, I've got the manifold here unbolted, but not unhooked for everything. Just enough access to get access to the freeze plug here. And I knocked it out, and I went in and cleaned out the pipe really thoroughly. It was really full of debris. Let me show you the debris. So that was all the debris that came out of the plug. And the plug was really rusty. It actually just cracked right in half as soon as I went to take it out. So I've got a new plug. I'm going to go ahead and get this a bit more attention before I put the new plug in. There's some pitting in here, but I'll go ahead and clean that up before I fit the new plug, and then put this manifold back on and pressurize it, and hopefully it doesn't leak anywhere else. Well, got the new plug in, cleaned very thoroughly, added a thin smear of sealant, and then knocked the new plug in place. So I'm going to wait for this to cure, and then I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the manifold. And hopefully it's all sealed and I don't have any other leaks in the system, because I wasn't able to do any pressure testing because of that leak at that plug. So once I get this back together, I'll be able to pressurize the system and see if there's any other leaks. Probably what I'll do is I'll just fill it up with water, run it for a bit, and then flush the engine again before I fit the new batch of coolant to it. Oh, and just for reference, that's a 19 millimeter plug. That one there is a 16 millimeter plug. I want to finish the episode on Thermocure with a short discussion on what I thought about the results, and also a little discussion on coolant. So this sample here was the coolant that was in the car. When you let it sit for a few days, it all settled out and it looked okay when you look down the radiator cap, but you can see just the level of dirt and crap that was in there. So as soon as you stir this up, it turned into a brown solution, but from the top it looked like normal coolant. So this is why you need to actually test the concentration of the coolant to make sure that it is still working, because clearly the problems on this car were related to bad coolant. So yeah, just check your coolant, make sure it's fresh, and you won't have corrosion issues. What I have here is the actual water pump from that car, and you can see how badly corroded it was from years of misuse. And I ended up having to change out this water pump, not because of the Thermocure, but because the bearings on this pump were bad. And if you go back and watch previous episodes, you can see the pump wobbling really badly when it was running. And I'm having to change out the bearings. Well, I mean, I changed out the whole pump because the bearings are bad. But if you look on this side, you can see the results of what the Thermocure did. Now, the impeller here is cast iron. And you can see how clean it looks. I mean, there's still just a little surface debris here. But yeah, the Thermocure did a great job of cleaning up the cast iron. And I'll put a picture here on the right showing the inside of the block after I did the Thermocure treatment. It also looks the same. And overall, I was very pleased with the cleanliness and just general level of rust removal that the Thermocure did. It also clearly took away a lot of the other scale that I mentioned earlier. So in the top tank of the radiator, I saw little flakes of rust. All that stuff was gone. In fact, I think the radiator is probably good for another, 20, 30,000 miles until something actually physically fails. But it seemed like the radiator ended up getting really clean after the Thermocure treatment. The car didn't actually have overheating issues, so I wasn't treating the system to cure an overheating problem. I was just treating it because I wanted to get rid of all the rust and all the sediment that was built up in there. So I did do several flushes to get all of the debris out of the engine before doing the Thermocure treatment. But I did 2 more afterwards, and when I put the coolant in it, before I did the pump, and then drained it again to take the pump out, that coolant was very, very clean, so I had no sediment after that. So yes, I did a bunch of flushes before and after the treatment, so I can't say whether or not the Thermocure did a great job of fixing the system. However, I felt really good about the condition of the system, especially after taking that freeze plug out and looking down the bore of the manifold. It was very, very clean and rust-free. So I think the product is great for doing what you need it to do. Just understand it does have limitations. Like, for instance, you can't just put in a totally rusty system and expect it to be totally clean. I did pre-clean everything of as much free debris as I could because I really wanted the Thermocure to work on surfaces that couldn't be flushed easily, like the sides of the block, or like the area on the bottom of the block where the sediment builds up. That area was also clean of residue. So overall, I was very pleased with the way it worked. I would like to try the Thermocure on a car that has overheating issues, just because I'm really curious to see what would happen. But suffice to say, I was pretty pleased with the results. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Like I said, this is as it came out of the car, so it's not even flash rusting. So there must be some sort of other surface treatment inside that product to preserve cast iron after it's been etched by the Thermocure. So yeah, overall, I'm really pleased with it. And if you guys thought this video was interesting or helpful, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the last part of this episode series of this single point injection car. It is once again about replacing this water pump and the reasons why I had to replace this pump. So that'll be the final episode before the final test drive. So stick around and check out that when it comes out, probably in the following week. So as ever, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.